It's interesting in the metabolic health space, there are some people that don't make tremendous distinctions. And so even if you're looking at Sachin Panda's work, he's one of these amazing researchers that is very focused on chronobiology or the body rhythms and how they respond to insulin sensitivity and eating versus non-eating. I think when I look at it is time-restricted feeding and intermittent fasting, there's a lot of similarities and then perhaps some differences. However, for the purposes of this conversation, I would say that when I think about time-restricted feeding, it's really, having this kind of compressed time frame in which people are consuming all of their food, which seems very similar to intermittent fasting. I know when you look at some of the researchers, there are some that believe that it's very aligned, they're very synonymous, and others that feel very differently. To me, I don't see a lot of distinction between either of them. It's really defining a time period in which you choose not to eat and defining a time period in which you choose to eat, and then determining based on gender, life stage, etc., which one of those works best for you and your lifestyle and your hormones, to be completely frank.
So there's a weird gray area here, because we should obviously, as humans, we need to sleep for part of the day. As diurnal animals, we sleep during the nighttime period, and during that nighttime period, we should not be consuming any food. So there is a window of time built into our schedule where we shouldn't have food coming into the system. So, and then based on looking at modern day hunter-gatherer tribes, traditional living people, we can, and combining that with modern research into the topic of time-restricted feeding and circadian rhythm and how nutrition interfaces with that, and all the animal experiments that have been done, we have good reason to believe that at least 12 hours, if not more, of our day should be fasting. But that should just be the normal state of eating. So we shouldn't call that, if someone has 12 hours of the 24-hour period of the day where they're not consuming food, or 14 hours, to me, it doesn't make sense to call that intermittent fasting. It makes sense to call that just a normal, healthy way of consuming food each day. So then the question becomes, well, how do we define intermittent fasting? Because some people do define intermittent fasting as consuming food within a 10 or 8-hour window of the day, whereas I would just say that is better termed time-restricted eating, and really that is just the normal thing that we should all be doing on a daily basis. So there has to be semantically some difference of definition between that versus what we're referring to as intermittent fasting. Do you agree with that, or how would you respond to my position on that?
No, I think that's certainly reasonable. I mean, when someone goes 12 hours without eating, I just call that digestive rest. And my standard, and I talk about this publicly a lot, is that should be the gold standard. Unfortunately, that's not the gold standard. I think your definition in that context is completely reasonable and feasible. And I think for a lot of us that are intermittent fasting, so fasting for longer periods of time, 16, 18 hours, we can acknowledge there's a pretty significant distinction. You're still getting benefits, even if you fast for 13 hours or 14 hours. And certainly someone that's new to fasting or just time-restricted eating in the context of this definition, there's still a lot of benefits that come through that or come with that. So from my perspective, when I'm thinking about longer episodes of fasting, that's when you start seeing some significant improvement with metrics. But in our current society, we are just encouraged to eat from the moment we get up to the moment we go to bed. And that's completely not aligned with our circadian biology. That's not aligned with our metabolic physiology. And I think for anyone that's listening, you may not per se be interested in intermittent fasting, but the time-restricted eating or feeding of a 12-hour time period during a day is certainly feasible. I have all teenagers, and even they go at least 12 hours a day without eating, and they eat a lot of food in their quote unquote time period in which they eat before they fall asleep. But for the rest of us that are adults and are fully grown and evolved, I think it should be the mainstay, and it should be what all clinicians are talking about with their patients, not just those of us in the kind of functional integrative medicine space.
Hey, this is Ari. I hope you enjoyed this little clip. And if you want to listen to the full length podcast, the link for that is down in the description below. Also, one more thing before you go, I want to mention, in case you don't already know about it, our formula, Energenesis. This is an amazing product that has multiple compounds in it that are scientifically proven in numerous studies to increase your energy levels, not just by 3% or 5% or 10%, but by 30 or 40 or 50% in a very, very short time frame. So one of these compounds that I'll mention here is called NT factor phospholipid, and it is an extract of phospholipids that comes from lecithin, and they extract the pure phospholipids from this, things like phosphatidylcholine, phosphatidylethanolamine, and many others. And these are the same fatty acid compounds, phospholipid compounds, that compose our cell membranes and mitochondrial membranes. And this specific patented formula has been shown actually to enter into the bloodstream undigested, basically without being broken down and denatured through the digestive process in the stomach and the intestines. It makes it into the bloodstream and actually makes it all the way to our cells and to our mitochondria, where it helps repair damaged mitochondrial membranes and facilitates our mitochondria functioning better. Now, all of that sounds like wonderful theory, and it sounds like it could be beneficial, but the real test is, has it actually been studied and been proven to increase your energy levels? And the answer is yes, absolutely. There are numerous studies outlined in a wonderful paper by a scientist named Garth Nicholson, in a paper called Lipid Replacement Therapy. I highly recommend checking this out if you're interested in digging into the research. But this compound has been studied in the context of multiple different kinds of chronic fatigue. Aging-related chronic fatigue, obesity-related chronic fatigue, obscure things like Gulf War illness, and numerous studies in chronic fatigue syndrome. And there are studies showing that this has the capability. They've taken one study, in fact, actually showed that in elderly adults over the age of 65, it restored their mitochondrial health, which had deteriorated heavily. It restored it to the level of healthy 29-year-olds, believe it or not. And they've actually measured energy levels in these people. And all of these studies across the board show improvements in energy of at least 25%, and typically more like 35 to 45% in just the span of between 4 to 12 weeks. That's how long all of these studies are, 4 to 12 weeks. They're showing dramatic, huge improvements in energy levels by helping to repair these mitochondrial membranes through this thing called lipid replacement therapy, using, again, this patented form of a phospholipid extract called NT factor. This is just one of about 20 ingredients proven to benefit mitochondrial health that you'll find in my formula, Energenesis. So I strongly encourage you, if you are struggling with your energy levels, if you're dealing with chronic fatigue, go grab yourself a bottle or 3 of this, or subscribe and save. Try it out. You are going to be blown away by the results. We get so many testimonials. We get so many emails from people talking about how this one thing has transformed their lives. So I cannot encourage you strongly enough to give this a shot. And let's say you buy 3 bottles, try out the first one, give it a month. And if you don't notice significant improvements, you can return the unopened bottles to us for a full refund. So give it a shot. I really think you're going to be blown away by the results. The formula is called Energenesis, and you can get it at theenergyblueprint.com or click the link below. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll talk to you again very soon.